This is Kim Hammer with your devotion taken from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. We find that Naomi's husband and 2 sons have died, and that the time to go back home to her homeland had come, and she had made the decision to do so. In that, she gave her daughter-in-laws the great gift of freedom to make the decision to go back home. In fact, we find that Naomi actually encouraged her 2 daughter-in-laws to go back home. She told them, said, go where your people are and go where your gods are. Go back to what you're used to. Go back to what you're accustomed to. You don't have to feel obligated to go with me. Naomi was not going to put a guilt trip on her 2 daughter-in-laws. In fact, she gave them some very practical advice as far as why they needed to go back home, because even if they went with her, and even if Naomi was able to find a man, and even if she was able to become pregnant, and even if she was able to have sons, would they really wait for those sons to grow up before they would marry her sons again so they could stay in the family line? So Naomi was looking at it from a very practical point of view. What's interesting is that Ruth begins to look at it from a very spiritual point of view. And while Naomi herself was probably a strong spiritual woman, yet at the same time, we find that she had let her emotions and the practicality of the situation enter into her decision to tell her daughter-in-laws, you go back to what you're comfortable with. Well, Ruth didn't want to go back to what she was comfortable with. The other girl, yes, she did. And she loved Naomi very much. I have no doubt in that. As you read the Word of God, she loved her mother-in-law very much. But she loved what was waiting back home for her also. That was her support network. That's what she grew up knowing. That's where her gods were. That's where her family were. And she made the decision to go back home to what she was comfortable with. However, Ruth made a different decision. She saw the big picture. Ruth saw that it was better to worship the true God than to go back to the gods that she had worshiped, because she had tasted what it was like to worship the true God. Also in the big picture, she saw that it would be better to be with her true people, who she could identify with, having worshiped the true God, than it would be to go back to even her own family and fall back under the worship of the false gods. I believe that by design, God mentioned that Naomi said, and one of the things she said to her daughter-in-laws, go back to your people, but also go back to your gods. I think that played a big part in what the decisions were made by the 2 girls. One wanted to go back to it, and the other had no desire to go back to it because she had tasted what it was like to worship the true God that Naomi had introduced her to. And because of that, we find that Ruth made the big commitment. And here are some of the big commitments that she made. She said, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and this solemn vow I make to you, if I do not, may the Lord deal with me ever so severely. Ruth had a determination to go where Naomi was, not so much because of who Naomi was, and not so much because she loved Naomi, but because she had experienced what it was like to be in the presence of the true God. You know, once you're in the presence of the true God and you've experienced what he has to offer, you'll never want to go back to the old ways. But it's your freedom of choice to decide which way you want to go.